Thanks for joining me in another episode of the UX Coach podcast. I had so much fun recording the conversation with Maria Giudice that you're about to enjoy. A kindred spirit, Maria is so many things beyond an agent of change that disrupted the ways of working at organisations such as Autodesk. We talked for nowhere near long enough about her passion and our shared love of Prince. I'm still reeling at hearing that she got to go to Paisley Park to a party just before he died, but I digress. This is a very different episode. We talk about everything from how we get our minds into the right place for creativity, what is meant by change making, the topic of her recent book, and what's happened since she released the pivotal book, The Rise of the DEO, exactly 10 years ago this September. So I'm going to stop gushing now. If you haven't got some soft lighting and a sweet tea, hit pause and come back to this point. Strap in. How did you get here? Where are we today? What are you doing? What have you been doing today? This afternoon? This morning? Because it's lunchtime,
so funny,
right?
when you said, where did you get here? I had immediately Talking Heads came into my mind. How did we get here? I started singing that. And
you may ask yourself.
Yes, that's what I heard.
Straight out my favorite song of all time.
Almost like a reflection of society. How did we all get here?
This is not my beautiful house.
Yes. So I forgot the question, Andy. We're off to a great start.
What have you been up to this morning?
What have I been up to this morning? Well, I live in Oakland, California. And so I have a morning ritual. So I kind of wait for the animals to wake me up. So I have a cat and a dog. And it's the same time every morning. The cat jumps on the bed, the dog attacks the cat, and then I'm in the middle of it. So that's how I wake up usually. And then I meditate for 20 minutes to get really, really grounded. And that's something that has been a part of my life for the last year and a half. And I feel like it's kind of fundamentally changed me as a person. So I recommend everybody try it. I meditate, and that just having that ability to kind of clear my mind, it allows me to really lean into the day much more grounded. And if we talk about my sordid past, it was the opposite of that. I used to jump out of bed, stress out in the morning, get to work and do the things. So I've learned in my wise years to kind of relax, get grounded, and then figure out what you want to do. So I have a ritual every morning, and that's what I do.
I actually do want to ask you more about that, because I think that before we start talking about that sordid past, understanding a little bit about that changes that you mentioned there, I think is interesting. The whole meditation space is something that I still can't get my head around. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's from decades of misunderstanding, or it being explained in a way that wasn't clear for me. You assume from everything that you see that it's about clearing your mind and clearing it from thoughts. But the way that my brain works is the complete opposite happens. And it's no, this is my living nightmare, because what you're doing is giving my brain permission to think about all the things and all at the same time. And someone said to me, no, actually, that's really what it's about. It's being able to just let it do that and see what it does. Mm-hmm. What's your process? How do you get clear or grounded, as you put it?
I think this is actually a really important thing to talk about, right? Because as designers, we are constantly living in our head. Designers have this sort of predisposition to be problem solvers. So I'm making a guess, but most people who are designing have very, very active brains. They might be naturally curious. They might be wildly empathetic towards people and animals and all living things. All the skills and all the things that designers bring to the table. But man, oh man, we hold a lot in our heads constantly. And if it's not problem solving, it's working with people. we've been really, and I have been really effective and really successful by being very, head focused and problem solving and all that. But I'd like to think about what are the missed opportunities when you don't clear your mind. And when I think about the times that I am the most creative and most open-minded is when I'm in flow, is when I'm actually not thinking, when I'm sitting on a beach staring at the ocean, or I'm laying in a bathtub, or I'm taking a shower. All of these like quiet moments are wildly creative. So that's what meditation kind of gives you permission to do, actually, is to empty your mind, almost like giving your mind an enema, like washing away all the bits, right? And then you have all of this free space to bring in ideas that probably didn't have space to be brought in before, because you had your mind can only hold so much information. People who know me well, I grew up in New York. I'm a New Yorker. I'm very urban. The idea that I meditate, people laugh, they're like, you're meditating? How could that be?
In between with fighting with taxi drivers and
yeah.
jaywalkers.
Yeah. But I have to say that it has like really, by like grounding myself and giving myself permission to just sit up for 20 minutes, and the animals meditate with me. They calm down and they sit with me. It's amazing.
Really? Even the cat?
Yeah. They, as soon as I sit up and start, the cat and the dog, they chill out and they meditate with me. By giving myself that space, it has made me more creative as a human being. And I would argue more compassionate, because I feel like I have like washed away all the bullshit that we hold in our minds, And you find this to be true when you're meditating. When anybody who meditates, whether you're new at it or old at it, you'll sit there and go, okay, I'm emptying my mind. I'm emptying my mind. And then like some thought comes in that is total bullshit and small and insignificant. And then you notice it, and then you let it go. And it has allowed me to realize how much bullshit comes into our head that we hold day to day that is not even important. It has taught me quite a bit. I really encourage my clients that work with me to, breathe and give yourself some space, because at minimally, it's going to make you more creative and more grounded to work with people.
You sharing in sort of describing it in that way gave me some things to reflect on. So up until a few years ago, I was running my own business, which I'd very specifically and purposefully called We Are AFK, which stood for Away from Keyboard, from old internet land. The reason for that was that although working in the digital sector, I don't believe that any good design work happens in front of a screen. And what I wanted to do really was to encourage people to step away from that. And so that was built more around learning and workshops. A few years into that business, I met up with a fantastic duo who were trying to encourage people to go for walks. And we sort of joined the dots between the two and started to adopt this, the walk shop, as they're now known, getting teams to go for a walk out in the countryside or just up and down the beach or something to have their meetings and to think about the things that they were doing. It's got me sort of reflecting on that a little bit and wondering whether part of the challenge that I've had with like meditation practice myself is environment, doing it inside, knowing that I'm still surrounded by all those things. And I know that that's part of the practice, isn't it? Is to be able to try and forget that those things are there. But I'm not quite there yet.
Well, I would argue doing walking meetings is a form of meditation. And being outdoors, there's a lot of scientific evidence around the importance of being outside in nature. Nature often calms our sympathetic nervous system or parasympathetic nervous system. I'm not sure if whoever the neuroscientists are, the researchers are, will know which one it is. But it calms our nervous system in a way that allows us to not be in a state of anxiety or being triggered or because that closes us down creatively. Being in nature, as you're doing, opens up sort of the chambers of creativity and mindfulness. So you are meditating when you're out in nature and walking. It's the same thing. You're just more active. You're just in a different environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I rode motorcycles, and as well as riding motorcycles myself, both my parents do. Whenever I talk to my dad about things that are going on for him, I know he's fine when he says like, "Oh, I've just been out for a ride," because that means whatever was happening is now he's gone and dealt with it. He's let it go. That's his way of sort of processing that, and maybe does the same kind of things I do, which is that there's a certain point where you've almost checked out of what you're doing, and you sort of come back into the awareness. It's the fact that it's something where on a bike you've got to be paying attention. You know, it's not like in a car where you just you're on autopilot most of the time, right? Yeah, we all just drive forward. On a bike, it's like the whole thing, you physically have to move to make this thing to move. You've got to be on it. You've got to be aware of things. And I think it's that having that focal point for him is the thing that then allows those other things to kind of slot out. And it just reminded me of a very dear friend contacted me who I admit I haven't spoken to for a long time. We used to go surfing in the morning, and I hated him for somehow managing to persuade me to get up at 5:30 to be going and sitting at the right tide at 6 a.m, freezing cold in the winter, because I'm in England, so the only time you can surf is in the winter. It used to really set my day. Like it was something which just really helped, because again, it's something where I've got a focal point. You're counting the sets, you're trying to figure out how you're going to get up. Is it going to happen today? Or you're just bobbing around talking to each other about what's coming.
Do you notice how you're different from a day when you go surfing versus a day when you don't? Do you notice the difference in how you show up?
Yeah, massively. And I think that it's another thing that I've adopted from my wife, actually, who did some training in the art of hosting and circles and creating safe space. We have these work rituals, and especially working in digital now, you have things like Agile's all built around these perfunctory rituals of daily stand-ups and all this shit, and so you don't need any of it. It's just micromanaging that's totally unnecessary. Like, if we have problems, we should be able to talk to each other. Something that I have adopted from her is at the start of a week, checking in with one another. How you doing? Seeing if you've got any of that kind of, oh God, I'm back at work. And then purposefully and meaningfully doing the same thing at the end of the week. So this idea of a checkout. And she used to do this with her team they'd all get together at 4 p.m. on a Friday, and she would host a circle and just go around to everyone and say, what have you got going on right now at 4 p.m. with an hour and a half left on the clock before the buzzer rings, that you're worried you might carry with you when you leave today, and that it's going to be hanging over you for the weekend, so that we can talk about it. It'll be, I didn't finish doing that email campaign, or, I've got this report that I need to put together, whatever. And it's basically letting each other know that that's okay, and actually fuck it and just leave it at the door, because whatever you don't do today, you do it tomorrow. This is not saving lives. We're making stuff. I mean, for some people, maybe it is, but for the majority of us, it's not. Whatever you don't do today can get done tomorrow. Those kind of practices, I think, have also meant that I know that I'm turning up and I can be truly present. I don't know if you had similar kind of experiences with that, of like trying to keep on top of things in recent years with living indoors. So cozy.
Well, I mean, the theme that we keep bringing up is this idea of care and self-care. I have been in design, this is scary, over 35 years. Between 35 and 40 years, I have labeled myself a designer in some capacity. So much of that career, which I love, is go, 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 go. Climb, 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 climb. Hit that deadline. Deliver that product. By all means necessary. Make the client happy. Make the product manager happy. All of that constant push of getting things done. depending on whether it was my own company where I had control or whether I worked in corporate America where I had some control, but not total control over my schedule, it comes at a cost. And part of doing this book about change making, which was really inspired because of my last work experience working at Autodesk in a role as a change maker and recognizing I did some great things really well, but there were some things that I didn't do well. And I wanted to sort of memorialize lessons learned in this book, that was why I wanted to create this book, was to actually tell people, here are the things that not only that I learned in this role, but here's 40 other people. Here are things that they paid attention to and things that they let go. And a big theme is around how you show up as a person, right? So much of our work, as you get out of just being responsible for shipping products to actually interacting with teams or leading companies, you start really needing to recognize the importance of what you're bringing to the table and how you're showing up. And if you show up stressed out with too many things in your head, you're going to be distracted. You're going to miss details. You're going to be an asshole to people, right? Your threatened self is going to show up. And all of that energy is contagious. So it has impact on the people around you. And the higher up you are, the more damage you can do with groups of people because it sets tone and culture, right? And the thing that I have so that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and the takeaways is taking care of yourself, making sure that you have time and space to be coherent and grounded, and that you have like capacity in your brain to be creative and open, which means that you have to have discipline around taking care of yourself and giving yourself space. That's going to, by slowing down, it's going to allow you and others to speed up because you don't have to do all of this damage control because you showed up in a bad mood. And so there's a reason to take care of yourself.
Acknowledging when you're in a position such as you were at Autodesk and some of the other, and being the owner of the business, can't get much further than where you are. As we all know, shit rolls downhill. So if you've got someone who's berating you, it's probably because someone's done it to them and someone's done it to them, and so on and so on and so on. Trying to understand a little bit more about how to break that cycle somewhere in that loop. If you can, if you can remove that attitude and the environment that you're in, so that the people that you're working with can not have to experience that. That's something that's of value. I think it's worth trying to do, right? We've all experienced those leaders or managers or senior people within our company that are just, there's stuff that's not going right for them, but you can't really sort of dig into it. The midnight emailer, that kind of person where you just think this isn't good because this means that you're afraid.
Yes.
You're burnt and fizzled because you're still on. You're still switched on. You can't let it go.
Yes. And I worked at companies where it was nonstop, 24/7 email, 7 days a week, always on. Managers sending stuff in the middle of the night. Whether or not they tell you not to look at your email, the fact that they're sending it at midnight, it puts the pressure on you to be like them. I was at my unhealthiest and sort of my worst self when I worked in cultures like that. I didn't thrive at all. And I did learn very early in my career because, I started a company. I was pretty young when I started Hot Studio, but, I didn't realize that, I kind of always used to say, I'm approachable. There's nobody behind me. You could tell me why you're, what's going on. Like a lot of leaders don't realize how much power they have over people, even if they come across saying, hey, I'm just like you. I'm a regular person. It's same thing with parents. You have to model good behavior. And I remember no matter what kind of bad mood I might have had when I was at home, I would never come to work with that mood and share that mood with people. Because again, it sets the energy, it sets the tone. You might think, oh, it's my shit, it's not yours. That when you're a leader and you show up that way, it affects everybody. And they're going to behave differently.
Surely you were carrying it then. How do you deal with that? Because you're going to take it with you, right? You are walking in the door with whatever's happening at home, and then you're trying to protect others from it.
Right. And it's not like being inauthentic. It's just taking responsibility that your emotions, your reactions are your own. You have to own up. So if you're in a bad mood or something bad happened, you got to really figure out a way to calm yourself down. So go take a walk, go sit in ocean or surf or meditate or just breathe before you step in the door and infect others with your bad attitude, because it's contagious. Right? Sort of like put a mask on, take own responsibility for the way you show up. If you're in a bad mood, that does not give you permission to impart that on other people. It's really critically important. Yeah. These things are so important for healthy environments, for change making. One of my mantras is change starts with you.
Yeah, and so this is why we've started on this path in our discussion. So you have a book that one of several books, but most recently, Changemakers. Going through it, something that I was thinking about. It's very different to the stories that you will often see of. If I think of a Seth Godin book.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me a little bit of Linchpin that I greatly enjoyed at the time. This idea of understanding what part of the balancing act you are at work, and that you should want to become the linchpin. You want to be the point, the balance point in the middle, where if it goes, then it topples. And it was very aggressive. That's why it reminded me of that, because it was almost like it's like the anti-hero of that sort of attitude and mindset, because it's sort of like it's almost removing yourself from it in a lot of places. What would you say is your definition of a change maker?
There's always these aha moments. I was reading about this idea when I'm starting to think about the role of design leaders, and sort of I think of change making as the next step up as a design leader. And when I say design leader, I'm not saying you have to go to design school and you have to get a CX degree and all this stuff. I'm talking about thinking like a designer, like embracing design as a strategy. So business people are designers, like engineers are designers, if they embrace design as a strategy and a mindset. So just to put the perspective of design in, putting that in place, and looking at the arc of my career and looking at how designers, in 2013, I wrote Rise of the DEO about, with this like crazy hypothesis that if CEOs and entrepreneurs adopted design qualities and characteristics, they can be incredible leaders. So, and then like 10 years later, literally it's been 10 years since Rise of the DEO, we are now seeing design leaders in every level of organizations. We're seeing chief design officers and chief product officers and vice presidents of design. That really didn't exist 10 years ago. The idea that designers would even be that high up in companies. So Rise of the DEO, here we are as Rise of the DEO, but now we have to possess a whole different set of skills, because we're no longer looking at designing the product. Some are, but the levels are, first you're hired to design a product and service. And then you can go to the next level up, and then suddenly you're managing people and teams. And then you're directing disciplines and organizations. And then you're at this level where your peers are not designers at all. They're business people, and they have different set of goals and objectives. As we get higher and higher up the ladder or the hill or whatever, our skills have to change from really thinking about the details of the interface to how do we navigate people and processes at scale to change people's hearts and minds and beliefs and behaviors and actions. It's a whole different set of skill sets. And so I got really curious about this, like, oh, what does it mean to be a change maker? As a designer, you treat everything like a design problem. That's my whole life is one big design problem. And you always start with research. So I'm like, all right, here's my experience. What are the other people's experiences like who've been in these situations? Right. And I want to hear those stories. I want to hear what their definition of change makers are. I want to hear what did they try and succeed at? What were the incredible failures that you want to share with others? And so this book's intention is to really show the human side of what it means to be in this situation. Of course, it's got tools and all these, things that you can do. But a big part of this is the being part of being a change maker. What I really appreciated with the people who I interviewed, they were so honest, and there was humility, and they didn't like hold back on massive failures. Many people who are in this position lose their job, right? If they're successful, they might be pissing off people in such high power that they're going to find themselves out of a job, within a few years, right? But you can be proud of the progress that you made while you were there. And that's what I wanted. That was the intention around the book. Now, when you say, what is the definition of a change maker? I came across in my research this definition of a change maker by Bill Drayton, who was the founder of Ashoka, which was sort of a nonprofit, social justice, social entrepreneur company. And he coined the phrase change maker in the 1980s. And he defined change makers this way: people who can see the patterns around them, identify the problems in any situation, figure out ways to solve the problem, organize fluid teams, lead collective action, and then continually adapt as situations change. And when I read this, it was one of those, lightning bolt moments. I was like, oh my God, people who see the patterns around them. So people who look at patterns, people who identify problems in any situation, people who figure out ways to solve the problem, people who organize fluid teams, people who lead collective action, and then continually adapt as situations change. That, my friend, is the quintessential definition of what a designer does. And so,
very true.
So change equals design, design equals change.
And the influence aspect of it as well, right? When you're at that early point in your design career where it's about what you would call like the tactical side of things and the making of things, then you start to really get into and how do people engage and interact and perceive this form, and you're just continually expanding that workflow, I suppose, that process of how you think about something, of the different things. At a certain point you reach it where it's like, oh, I have this corporation, what are all the bits of this corporation, how do they interact with each other, how do the mechanics work of this to make the thing that comes out the other end, and then you look at, and then how do people engage with that, and how do these bits work? It's the same mindset. The final piece of it is you've got to think about, okay, so if I believe there's an opportunity to change the way that this works, am I going to have to influence or encourage people within that system, that ecosystem, to act, behave, or interact with something different? What's the difference between doing that where you have the power of agency like you had at Autodesk, where that was actually your primary function, versus insert other company name where that's not your primary function as it might be perceived by others around you, but ultimately is actually what you're there for?
Great question. And there's a saying in this book that nobody hires a design team to maintain the status quo. right? Again, like the quintessential definition of design equals change. You can be a change maker at any level of the organization. You just have to be clear about what are you empowered to do in the level that you're in. The measure of success is not executing a thing. The measures of success when it comes to change is progress. Have you made progress? Have you moved the needle? Moving the needle is going to be dependent on where you sit inside an organization. Everybody's got a stakeholder. Even when you're at the top, you have a stakeholder, right? So there's always going to be, nobody has 100% agency over your, you're always going to have to deal with other people and influence them and change hearts and minds. And I think a lot of people make the mistake that if you lean into logic and competency, everybody's going to agree with it. As long as I could present facts of the case, then why would anybody disagree? Look at look at the world we live in now. You can put all the facts out in the world. If people don't believe in your position, the facts aren't going to help you. We have to focus on absolutely there's process and there's competency in what we do for a living, but the other side is about people relationships. As designers, we have fought for the position that we're in right now. We have really fought to get to where we are. Along the way, we have been relentless customer ambassadors. We are people-centered. We care about our customers. We empathize with them. We have compassion. We fight for them. As we move up and work with other people, we forget that it's equally important to have empathy and compassion with the people that we are working with, whether or not we agree with them. So we have to find ways in which we can get common ground in order to make progress.
I was told once that you reach a point in time where you have to make a decision as to whether you want to become stuck in your ways or to mellow. Is perhaps one of those forking moments, and the difference between someone who doesn't quite get that this whole benign argument of design needs to have a seat at the table is a failure to actually understand what design is, and that it's already got one. The mellow road is perhaps the person that knows that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and doesn't matter where you are and what table you're sitting at, you've still got to talk to the people that are sat next to you and have a nice conversation and enjoy dinner.
Yeah, I think it's pretty amazing that we are wired for compassion for our customers, but we somehow have incredible biases, perhaps against the very people who are our peers or our superiors, right? We create stories about them sometimes that they don't get what we do or they don't get design. And, maybe they don't. And I often say, hey, if they don't get design, don't use the word design. Because design is what we do. It's the juice that makes, it's the engine that gets things going. It's a change engine, and they might have an entirely different set of vocabulary that means exactly what we mean, but we get so hung up sometimes in defending our territory that we don't realize that we're actually talking about the same exact thing, but fighting over the actual words.
Yeah, that's very true. And we'd have the same attitude back if you were talking to an analyst and they were talking about statistical significance and, economies and estimates and blah. You do the same thing, right? You switch off. It's about finding that shared language and understanding. What I'm getting from this is being a change maker or an agent of change doesn't mean that you have to be a leader. No. Sounds to me like they're very different mindsets or skill sets. Where do we think that sits?
I totally agree. And I also think the word leader, I think everybody has leadership in them. They just have to figure out what that means for them. So that's another one of those words where if you look at the world, your own group of people that you hang out with, either at work or in your family or whatever, chances are you're leading something, right? Could be as small as I'm in charge of dinner, all right? sets of leadership decisions that are made in your life. So you don't have to be here in this position at this stage in this company at this size in order to be a change maker. It's looking at your environment and how do you achieve a goal? Like, where do you want to go? Who do you want to be with? What kind of world do you want to live in? And what's within your control to make progress towards achieving the thing that you hope to achieve? You could be very early in your career. You're going to have a whole different set of challenges than somebody who's much later in their career, but equally hard for where you are in your life. Equally hard, equally challenging, equally rewarding.
When we were talking a couple of weeks ago, I seem to remember you saying something along the lines of, you've made so many mistakes in your life that one of the things that you want to do is try to be able to document them in a way that means that other people can't don't have to make those mistakes or won't make those mistakes.
Right.
It's taken residency in my head, and I went for a walk and I was thinking about it loads. I've been there as well. I want to be able to show you how to do something that took me ages to overcome, so that you haven't got to do that and you can go and make new mistakes. Actually, what I then started to reflect on was, but I think you do need to make those mistakes. And I think they do need to make the same things. And then wondering whether that was actually the problem of, are we not being forgiving to people that haven't yet made that same mistake, so that we can go, oh yeah, right, yeah, I remember that, so that they've experienced it themselves. And it's been driving me crazy ever since we spoke.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, because I don't want this to be carried into the weekend. I don't want you to. It sounds like you've been holding this on for like 2 weeks.
A little bit. So I'm doing some work at the moment where I started listening to someone that was talking about something where I sort of reflected it back and said, so this is a very common challenge that most businesses and organizations have of corporate knowledge. And this idea of that we have these great challenges where you lose the story of how something came to be as soon as the person that was responsible for it goes.
Yeah.
If you keep coming into these organizations, as I do as a consultant and have done many times, is you just see the same thing over and over again. And everyone that you speak to there knows, like, oh yeah, I know we rebuilt this 4 years ago, and we've done this before and everything. And we see that as being a bad thing. Isn't it like the circle of life? Isn't it the cycle that we need to sort of actually get on board with and go, yeah. Like, yeah, sure. Like, learn from the, failures of our forefathers and everything. But also, do we?
Yeah. Well, first of all great points, because I do believe we're all on our own path. And it actually brought up something, a memory for me. So
cool.
When I was in my 30s, maybe early 30s or late 20s, I was dating a guy who was about 10 years older than me. And he was like a really well-known calligrapher. Little fun fact about me, I studied calligraphy in college, and I have like I was a master calligrapher at one time. And I was dating this guy who was like super, like one of the best calligraphers in the world. So he was constantly trying to critique my work or give me business advice or whatever. Like, in the whole relationship, his years of wisdom, he was trying to be compassionate and say, hey, here's all the mistakes I make. Don't make the same mistakes. And I remember being so angry at him. It kind of broke us up, because I'm like, I need to make those mistakes myself. I understand you're trying to protect me. I need to make those mistakes myself. So I do agree, rather than like, don't make these mistakes. This is more like, here's our experience, life experience that we want to share with you. You might make the same mistake, or you might take a U-turn, because everybody's on their own path. So it's no guarantee. you're going to make that mistake again. You might likely make that mistake, but then you might learn faster. Oh, I remember Maria said this. Oh, and here's a different way to think about it, right? First of all, it sucks being old. Okay. Like I'm 60 years old. I can't fucking believe I'm 60 years old. I just want to say it. I have to say fuck because I can't believe that I'm 60 years old, right? Because it's like,
I think you've earned it.
When I was 20, I thought I'm going to be dead when I'm 60. Oh, 60 is so old, right? And now I'm 60. And when I was in my like mid 50s, I started really worrying that, as a lot of people do in their 50s, I'm becoming less relevant in companies because there's a bias against old people in tech. It's all about young people and new technology and new ideas. And I started feeling this fear that, I am no longer going to be like, people aren't going to look towards me to be the next VP because I'm so fucking old, right? And everybody else is like 20 years old anyway. So I was going through those stories in my head, and it took me a lot of time to kind of move through that. But how I moved through it was, maybe maybe that's not the right place for me to be anymore. Maybe at like my late 50s, it's not the right place and time for me to be in this company when everybody's much younger. Maybe they do need a different type of thinking than the thinking I'm bringing in. So that might be true, might not be true. But what is true is you can't take away all of these years of experience and wisdom. And the thing that I'm so proud of is the path that I've been on and that I continue to be on. Just because I'm 60 doesn't mean I'm dead. I'm interested in so many other things that I can step into that are more appropriate for my age and the things I'm interested in. But the wisdom that people are bringing to our discipline now is there. When I was coming of age as a design leader, there weren't any models. There weren't any role models, very few role models, and the role models were typically like Steve Jobs and, Johnny Ive, who are great, but not appropriate for everybody. And there's bad behavior associated there. But now there are so many great mentors and role models who have gone through where we are as a people, as a community. And there's so much wisdom that people are willing to share. Whether or not they're going to make the same mistake or not, that's okay. But there's at least information there. And there are people who've been there who can have compassion and empathy and information. That's what I'm leaning into in my life right now. I want to be in service to this community by sharing what I know. Whether or not you're going to believe in it or agree or even ignore it, that's okay. But it's there it's there for the taking if you want it.
So this is where I wanted to get to. This idea of being a change maker and acknowledging that is not about, make the iPod thinner. It's about make the people that make the iPod feel that they are in an environment where they can actually do the best work that they can. There reaches a point, I think, just purely based on Moore's law, we have just under 20 years between us, but maybe 40s is the new 60s. And, ever decreasing circles, I feel like I'm very much out to pasture already. But the thing that I can do is share the last 23 years of my life and what I've learned, and maybe that is our role. What else can we be doing? Because I think we are now in a very strange period of time where there is a completely new attitude towards work, which I am 100% behind. I am all for it. This whole idea of like, I am going to show up and do the job and go, don't make money for somebody else. And anyone that I teach, I tell them to stop looking at internships at Google and start your own business instead. But I think that's just the punk at heart is, fuck the establishment, build your own thing. What else can we be doing? Because they are ultimately still inheriting, dare I say it, your generation's mindset for business, which is, will grind your bones until they're dust.
That's right. We really fuck things up. I'm constantly apologizing to my 2 children who are in their 20s. But you know what? Every generation has skeletons, and they're artifacts of the era that they grew up in, right? And they did the best that they can based on the world that they saw, and hopefully they did it with good intention, even if those intentions turned out badly, right? So there's definitely a lot of things that are really wrong with this world. It's the younger generation that gives me hope. It's my kids who grew up in high school, not necessarily learning trigonometry, but out there protesting for Black Lives Matter every day, or protesting because teachers aren't being paid enough, right? It's, they're growing up with a different set of problems that they have to grapple with and solve. But they are also a generation that doesn't really see color, and they don't see gender. And there's a whole bunch of really great things that are coming out of this generation. I think there's a realism that they have work to do. In some ways, we have to get out of their way, but we don't necessarily run away from the problems. I think we want to make sure that they have the space to exercise their creativity and beliefs and show their power in numbers. And I always tell my kids, you have so much power that you could bring and make change happen. If young people don't come out to vote, they're going to wind up in the same place we're in now, right? So they can complain all they want, but if you don't vote, the bad guys win. We have to create the conditions for them to be successful. How do we do that? How do we allow them to be creative and safe and create environments that are going to work for their generation and be open to it? And that's what gives me hope. Like, I could really lean into all of the bad things that are happening here. Here in the US, bad shit happens every day, but there's a lot of young people who are entering state governments and making waves. And so you can definitely see the conflict between the younger generation and the older generation. And maybe the older generation has more, they're figuring out ways to stay in power. But guess what? We're going to die. So maybe we should just die off so that, new things could happen. So I don't know. That's a long answer to the question, but that's what I say. And like I said, I don't tell my kids what to do, but I'm here to listen to them, and I'm here to coach them to be the best that they can be, and make sure that they use their power and unlock their power because they have it.
Such a powerful and invigorating message for us to finish up on. Being a teenager in the 90s, watching Kurt Cobain being interviewed at some European festival, and the comments, broadly speaking, were along the lines of, we're just here waiting for the dinosaurs to die out, and they will always die out. And then seeing an interview with John Lennon where he was paraphrasing basically exactly the same thing. I think it's the natural cycle of things, right? Mm-hmm. We all have that opinion of those that came before us fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely did. I've fucked up so many times that I can't even count.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I will continue to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I think the difference is that I've reached the point now where I'm actually okay with it. And I'm not going to keep trying to right wrongs. I'm just going to acknowledge them and think about what I'm learning from those experiences. And that seems to be the bit that's missing in business, is that there's a lot of bullshit sayings, and the whole startup sayings of fail fast and fail hard is got to be one of the biggest lies ever. So if all else,
yes,
maybe we can just be the people that actually say, no, that is exactly what we want you to do, and to embrace it and encourage it.
People have a lot more power than they think they have.
If people would like to learn more, is there anywhere that they can go to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's first of all, you can always Google my name if you spell my name right. You can find a lot of information, years of information online about me and my talks. If you're interested in coaching, because that's what I do now, I'm an executive coach. I coach people all over the world. You can read up about me at hotstudio.com, or you can also contact me at LinkedIn. Just mention where you heard about me, and just try not to sell me a website or security systems or any of those things, and I'll most likely answer back. So, I'm around. I can be found. I'm not hard to find. Oh, and please buy my book. I forgot. Please buy my book. That's all I want you to do. That's your only call to action. Buy my book, Changemakers: How Leaders Can Design Change in an Insanely Complex World. Please buy it. You will enjoy it. It is well designed and it's filled with pearls of wisdom.
Check out the show notes on theuxcoach.com for links to the book and links to all the references of the things that we have talked about in this episode. If you would like to share your experiences of moving through your career in UX design, service design, all the things design, then get in touch. I would very much like to meet you, and I would love to be able to share your story with everyone else around the world. We've now got an average of over 5,000 subscribers, which for a little show that's just me putting it together, I think it really shows that there are people that are experiencing the same things that you are and are even more so eager to talk about it, and I hope inspire you and help you get clear and move forward. Until next time, you can subscribe to the UX Coach newsletter, which runs on Substack, information on the website. I promise you will only get stuff when I think that there is something that is worth sharing. See you soon.